Hello, welcome to our discussion on Indigenous Hands, the Indigenous Voices, which is brought to you by Save the Deaf and Endangered Languages Initiative. I'm glad once again to be here to discuss Indigenous Sign Languages, especially Indigenous Sign Languages found in African continent. Today, I'm going to be taking the stage. I know that you've not missed me so much. We've been having Mary Edward discuss a number of sign language with us, and we are still going to come up with more topics of things that happen in Adomorabe Sign Language. But today we are going to be talking about one important aspect of Indigenous Sign Languages that we have been looking at, which is gesture. Gestures in sign languages are things that stand out, even though it is a little bit confusing sometimes to some people. So today, our topic is gesture in Indigenous Sign Languages. Gesture in Indigenous Sign Languages. So we are looking at the role that gesture plays in Indigenous signing or Indigenous signing system. And like I said, it is somewhat confusing to some people what gesture is and the roles that it plays. I want to let us understand that when we sign or speak, our arms, our hands, our head, our mouth, they all move to make some grammatically meaningful movements, some grammatically meaningful expressions. Sometimes it may not be meaningful, but these are the movements that accompany our speeches and our signing. Years back, when sign language was not looked upon as a full language, sign language was being referred to as gestures. In the beginning of our discussion in the series of Indigenous Hands, the Indigenous Voices, you could recall, if you've been following, that I said that the sign languages that existed in African continents in many communities before the colonial era, that they were regarded as gestures. Some people looked at them as gestural expressions. Others say they were the use of hands in making gesticulations. So there were different ways that they were referred. But as time went on, the study of linguistics came to understand that sign languages are full languages because they possess the properties that spoken languages possess, though some may be in their different features. So it was understood that sign languages are full sign languages. Now, as study has continued to go on, sign linguists are beginning to look at sign languages, even the developed ones, as languages that are full of gestures. Right now, a lot of scholars that are looking into the roles that gestures play in our speeches and in our signings have found a lot of benefits, a lot of functions and advantages, of gestures in our speeches and in our signing. So several authors have looked at gestures from different perspective, and we in this discussion today will just talk a little bit about some of the functions that we see that gestures make, both in speech and in signing. But in signing, several studies show that signs are not gestures like some people thought in the past, and some people still think today. Signs are not gestures. In the communities that we have studied and documented their sign language systems, one of the beautiful things we observed is the full use of gesture to accompany signings of different deaf signers. It is a little bit interesting to look at that aspect of the study. So we have also seen some other studies that are done by other scholars whereby they describe sign language system that is growing up from gestures. So it is not out of place for a signing system to develop from gestures. Many indigenous sign languages are found to have developed from gestures. Many are found to have a lot of, gestural expressions in them. But both developed and yet to be developed sign languages, the same role gesture plays, according to studies so far right now, the same role that gestures play in yet to be developed sign languages are similar to the ones to the role that gestures play in developed sign languages, similar to the roles that gestures play in spoken languages also. So sign language are beginning to try to look at the demarcation between signs and gestures. That's part of the study, ongoing studies these days. What is the line of demarcation between signs and gestures? I found out that I'm going to show you a picture or video of one of our signers that was a very proficient user of gestures, and in almost all his signings, he makes use of additional expression with his hands, with his head, with his mouth. How he moves his mouth and head most of the times different from how the other signers that we recorded moved, these parts of the body. And he also uses all his body system to sign, in addition to the fact that he also uses an elaborated signing space. So this is another aspect of this is um, something like what we call idiosyncratic signing system. You find out that it, one signer may be signing a word or expression different from how another signer does that. We will be talking about idiosyncrasy in signing system maybe in the near future, if not in the next volume of this topic. But today we are looking at how gestures simulate into signs and what functions that the what roles that they play. So sign linguists will say that it is more helpful to say that gestures are an integral part of language, whether signed or spoken. um have you seen, even just as I'm talking, I unconsciously move my hands in different directions, in different forms, some of which have very direct relationship to what I want to say, like in directionality or showing the movement of something. Some may not have any direct link to what I'm saying, which is what we call iconicity. Some gestures could be iconic while others are not, while others will look very or sound very abstract. But that does not mean that they are not useful both in signing and in speech. So the way we gesture, we do it unconsciously, subconsciously, especially when we are native speakers of a language. So in this sign language system, you see this deaf signer signing the expression here that should end in one timing but he extends it to additional timing because that's the way he signs. And if you look at the way he moves both his eyes, mouth, and head, that's part of his signing system. Those that speak also have different ways they use gestures. One person may use gesture more elaborately than another, and it doesn't mean that the person that uses less gesture in the speech is not a good speaker, or the person that uses more gesture speaks better than the person that does not use. No. So that comes back to the behavior, the mannerisms that we add in speech or sign, which make up the gesture we're discussing today. Scholars have looked at different body parts that we use when we gesture. Some scholars believe that signers produce gestures with their face and other parts of the body, which co-occur with the signs that they produce. They do not produce idiosyncratic hand gestures concurrently with their signs. This was according to a theory which was later refuted. And another theory said signers gesture with their mouth, and this person was, seeing gesture only in the mouth. Another theory says signers gesture both with their hands and their mouth. They produce idiosyncratic hand gestures concurrently with their signs. And co-sign gestures form an integral system with the signs, just like the co-speech gestures form with speech. So the letter theory seems to be what sign linguists are going by right now, believing that gestures are an integral part of the signing, just like gestures are an integral part of the speech. I am a speaker of a language. When I speak, I use gesture, I use my body, I use every part of me that I unconsciously feel is is supposed to make meaning in the expression I'm making unconsciously. That's so important to know. That you do this unconsciously, subconsciously. As a speaker of a language. So this is a role that gestures, seem to play in our daily expressions. All right. We hope to continue this topic later on, and I will be glad to see you again next week. Bye.